Well, what has the market reaction been to today's rates decision? Many have been saying that leaving it steady has been pretty much anticipated.
I think there you're quite right, but looking at the figures that the Bank of Namibia has published, we would actually lean towards also seeing a cut of around 50 basis points at this round. We've got a number of reasons that would support our view, and while we're also cognizant of the position that the Bank of Namibia has taken, we would argue that the very low inflation that we experience at the moment and the very low private sector credit extension paired with relatively low GDP numbers would definitely augur much better for seeing a rate cut here in Namibia, very similar to what we've seen in South Africa as well. I think with that we also mustn't forget that a lot of the funding for the banks locally is priced off JIBAR in South Africa. So in terms of that, we do have strong linkages between the two markets. One of the strong points that the Bank of Namibia, however, highlighted that would speak for keeping rates on hold are the position of the international reserves that they're looking at. We also quickly looked at international reserves and compared them to the past couple of years, and actually need to note that at the moment our international reserves are in a fairly strong position, so that at least from where we're sitting at, without the complete picture that the Bank of Namibia would be having, it looks maybe overly anxious to have kept rates on a hold rather than decreasing them, very similar to what we've seen in South Africa.
Well, looking at the picture as it stands right now, yes, we've got inflation sitting within the target band. It's sitting at 5.6% at this stage, but there are risks to this. I mean, let's take a look at some of the risks that are out there when it comes to the inflation outlook in the country moving forward, and how much of a concern and a factor that should be in these considerations.
Yeah, I think the first point to be noted there, the Bank of Namibia does not monitor inflation per se as it's done in South Africa. As long as we see single-digit growth, it's more or less within the comfort zone of our central bank. But that said, I think one of the concerns are definitely vehicle sales that are increasing a bit. It also seems to have to do that the current vehicle sales are a bit at a cyclical high, as we usually in the time of February or March of the year we see vehicle sales spiking relative to other seasons in the year. The one thing that to me also is quite concerning is where the housing market is sitting at the moment, with house prices continuing to increase, very different to what we've seen in South Africa, and also rentals on an upward movement. Together with that, of course, we'll have a decision soon whether NamPower, our national electricity utility, will be allowed to increase the electricity tariffs by 35%. This obviously could have quite a negative impact on inflation, which we could see increasing going forward based on that. Obviously, together with that, other administered prices such as water could also possibly increase, adding to an upward inflation spiral.
Within that entire scenario that you've painted out there, what rate of private sector credit extension growth are we seeing in the country? At
the moment, private sector credit extension as quoted by the Bank of Namibia stands at 8.7%. This, according to some graphs that I've got in front of me, looks almost like the lowest level we've seen in the last couple of years. So from that side, also not something that from where I'm sitting at would concern me too much.
Have Namibian commercial banks been lowering their rates in line and in tandem with the central banks itself? Because we were talking about this issue yesterday on the show, where we've seen many African countries' banks resistant to actually lowering their rates in tandem.
We have seen something similar in the past in Namibia, but of late the banks have actually been quite reactive to what the Bank of Namibia has done. Whenever the Bank of Namibia has cut rates, it sometimes has taken them about 2 weeks to cut their rates in tandem, but it did occur. And even when last year the Bank of Namibia kept rates on hold but requested the commercial banks to drop their prime lending rates, they eventually have also done what the Bank of Namibia requested within the time frame that the Bank of Namibia requested.